So the fastest way to become the person that you want to be is to throw yourself into a situation where you've got no choice but to dig yourself out and, you know, get a result. So just before we start this video, if you haven't already done so, do me a favor, like it and subscribe, because it helps me to help you create more videos like this to help you in your personal and professional life. And you might say that there's a term for that, and it's called throwing yourself in the deep end, or going into something 2 feet first. And it's a great thing to do that. It's very exciting, but it's also obviously got some risk attached to it, because, you know, if you do this very cavalier and you throw yourself into a silly situation where you have absolutely no chance of digging yourself out, then, you know, that lesson might be very, very painful and not be worth it. You know what I mean? You want to get a good result, but going into something 2 feet first, it's like the book Burn the Boats. The idea of burn the boats, nothing to do with boats landing on beaches, by the way. The idea with, well, it is actually, but it's a historic term that I think the Vikings used to use, you know, when they was invading a new land, they burned the boats to signal to the other invaders, you know, the crew, that there was no turning back. So when you go into something 2 feet first, this is what you're doing. You're going in without an out, right? And it just so happens that the more outs that you give, when we say an out, this is a way to turn back, a way to exit, right? The more outs that you have, the more chance you're going to quit. This is why, you know, when you go for like, if you go for funding on a business, right, or you want any kind of loan, even a mortgage, something like this, right, usually money, anyone that's lending you money wants it backed by some security, right? And the reason being, you know, if you go for like funding, any kind of loan, they want it secured because they don't want you running away, right? If they can see, like, you know, the idea that a young entrepreneur who's got absolutely nothing to lose but the shirt off the back, right? The reason why a lot of the time they don't get invested, even if they're really bright and got all the skills, is because they got nothing to lose. It's far easier to invest in someone that maybe has a young family, a mortgage to pay, right? They can't run away, you know what I mean? This is why the more constraint you have, it's almost like, you know, when you go for a loan, it's easier to get a higher credit score when you've got a PAYE job, because they know that most people in jobs are pretty shackled and tied to that, right? So when you burn the boat, so to speak, and you go into something 2 feet first, there is no turning back. That's the idea of it. If you leave yourself loads of outs, like, oh, I'll just invest this little bit of money, or I'll just put this bit of time into it, right? Knowing that you can quit at any point, what are you really doing there? What are you really risking? And that's why you should go into it 2 feet first, because the growth and, you know, this is really the quickest way to become that person. So if you want to do something, you want to achieve something, the quickest way is to chuck yourself in the deep end and go 2 feet into it. It's obviously the most risky, and initial risk, maybe a bit of pain up front, because when you go into something properly, there's always a lot of delayed gratification. And I think back through my life, I've done this a few times now. I first did it with a job, you know what I mean? I took this job on knowing that I didn't quite have all the experience and skills fresh out of university, but I just thought, you know what, I'll just learn on the job, and I did. One of my first jobs was to detail out this big office and factory extension, And I'd not done it before. You know, you learn a few things at university, but I'd not done it before. And I got this job and just took it on, thinking, what am I doing? And I'll tell you what I did. I read the building regulations in a week, the whole lot, top to bottom, and memorised it, and looked at other people's work and just replicated it and put detailed work together. I've also done it in business a couple of times now, you know, with both my businesses, thrown myself in the deep end. You could say this current business, you know, the e-commerce business, nowhere near as much risk and as much in the deep end as I did with the software business. I mean, with the software business, I really chucked myself in the deep end, 2 feet first, committed every penny I had, every hour I spent working on it, and it was very lonely for many years. And you feel the pressure. I remember thinking, fucking hell, I should have invested in houses instead, and I've lost all this money and it's not going anywhere. And that's what happens, you know what I mean? When you're deep in the bottom, you've got to keep going. But I was 2 feet in. There's a term, sunk cost fallacy, where what it means is you've already invested a lot of time, but the sunk cost fallacy works when even, you know, no matter what you've invested up front or to this point, the chances, if the chances of succeeding are so low, irrespective of what you've invested in, you should quit at times. But the sunk cost fallacy works where you've already committed so much money that you just can't bring yourself to quit, you know, and you just feel so pot committed. It wasn't like that with the software business. I knew I had to push through and make it work. And I feel like that now with the e-commerce business, you know, it's in its infancy. And I've committed quite a bit of cash to it personally. And it's performing, you know, like you can see everything going up, sales and audience and traffic and all this. But I knew it was not going to be a 5-minute thing. I knew it was going to be, you know, a multi-year journey. So I've deliberately thrown myself into that now, committed that money, and I have to make it work. And I know that there's probably about 2 years worth of graft, at least, ahead of me. And I've committed myself to it. Could I walk away? Well, I don't think I can. My conscience wouldn't let me walk away. I could, you know, physically just walk away because, and just accept the loss of all the funding that I've put into it and all the setup and the time, but I don't want to because it's performing. You know, I can see it performing and I'm happy to put the 2 years into it or whatever, you know, it'd be longer than 2 years, but I'm happy to put the time in from now. And there's no way I am 2 feet in, pot committed, right? My conscience, everything that I've worked for would not let me give that up now, right? No matter what. The sunk cost fallacy won't come into it even if the numbers did. And this is a good thing, right? I can't remember what book. I think it might have been in Thinking Fast and Slow. It was in Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. There was a section in there where he talks about people that start businesses. Usually when people start businesses, there's this, is it Murphy's Law? Where people just, you know, Murphy's Law is like, if something can go wrong, it probably will, but no one counts it. Everyone expects results to be quicker because they think they're above the rules. And most people that start businesses just do not account for anything that could go wrong, when the best thing that you should do is look at statistically how long it would take for you to get success, and statistically what are your chances of getting that success. And if people looked at the odds rationally before starting businesses, they would realise the chances of success are very low, sometimes as low as 10%, you know, 9 out of 10 fail, 8 out of 10 fail, whatever. And also, it usually takes somewhere like 7 to 10 years. And if people honestly got that into their heads before they started a business, it's not worth it on paper. They'd be better sticking at a job. It isn't worth it. So why do they do it? Well, there's two reasons. One is because people just have this need to do something and they want to just chuck themselves in the deep end, you know, they just have the passion, right? And they just feel the need. They just don't want to live a mediocre life, and that's the best reason. The second reason is they think they just don't account for all the things that could go wrong and think everything's going to run swimmingly. Why? Because it's them. You know, why would it take 7 years for them when they think they're above? Everyone thinks that nothing's going to go wrong. They just think they're above the rules. So if you think about them two reasons, you know, that's why people start businesses. But the only one that really matters is having that passion. Because if you didn't have that real need to do this, it wasn't like a life mission, I don't think you'd throw yourself 2 feet into anything. You know, we just have this calling, I guess, this need to do things. I can feel it. To me, it's like, it's not about money, it's about adding value in the industries that we work in. You know, in my tech business, it's adding value to engineering and my clients. That's the most important. There's nothing like it, you know, when you get a really good case study. It's amazing. It's like, I've helped this organisation, or I've helped this group of people. And then in the e-commerce business, that's directly helping individuals. You know, I like that. And that's why we do things. The funny thing is, on the second business, which I started this year, I kind of knew straight away, having been there before, this isn't a 6-month job and get your money and run. I knew the minute I ordered the stock and committed my own personal funds to it, I felt it in here, you know. It was like, shit, I better do this now. And that is the moment when I felt committed. So, and it kind of felt good and bad. It was like bad because, like, well, I could have done with the money for other things, but good in a way, because it's like, well, yeah, I've got a bit of short-term pain and a bit of delayed gratification, a few years of, you know, waiting for it to really get some profits up, but it's flipping exciting. That's what life's about. You know what I mean? Your job in life should be 2 things: character development and developing your skills, right? You want to experience life, and this is why we try and achieve our goals. Character development needs good mental models, good skills. And that's what we want to do, you know. I want to develop my own character, you know. Stop being a dick all the time. Start adding value to people's lives. And also, become more mindful. That's one of my big goals. Spiritual journey, become more mindful. Be in the moment. You know, that's one of the greatest things, because when I was younger in my career, and also when I was sort of starting the business, I was fucking all over the place in my head. Yeah, I had all these skills and stuff, and you know, lots of ambition. I was super ambitious, but I was never in the moment. I was all over the place. A lot of people are like that when they're young. You know, you can see them making identical moves to maybe you did, and that's fine, because that's part of the journey. But the quicker you can be in the moment, or as Nigel Risner calls it in the Impact Code, he calls it be in the room. Wherever you are, be in the room. So when you're at work, be in the room. Be present in that moment is one of the universal mental models and life skills that you can learn. It's very, very much worth chucking yourself in the deep end and going into 2 feet first. So yeah, the quickest way to become the person that you want to be, the quickest way, I mean, it's the easiest or the least risk, it's the most risky, is to shut yourself into a situation where you've got no choice but to dig yourself out of it and perform. throw yourself in the deep end. All right. Thanks for listening. Hope you like this view. And yeah, don't forget, like the video, subscribe. See you all next time.